Dear viewers, Assalamu alaikum. With me today are Sayyid Ali Imam, Sayyid Zaidi, and Sayyid Firdaus. We will hopefully be taking you through the remaining objections raised by Farid. My name is Nazim Kazmi, and the purpose of today's show is to respond to the objections raised by Farid.
Next, Ibn Jarir Al Tabari. Now, Ibn Jarir here is quoting Muhammad bin Humayd al-Razi, who's been classified to be a liar, and that's the first thing. Secondly, he's quoting from Ziyad bin Kulayb, who is not an eyewitness. So that's a report that we reject as well.
At point 2, Farid raises objections to the report by Ibn Jarir al-Tabari in his Tarikh al-Tabari, and at point 29 in the book Riyad Al Nadira by Muhammad al-Tabari. We shall be looking at the objections he's raised, especially around the personalities, historical personalities, and the authenticity of Ibn Humayd and Ziyad ibn Kulayb. So without much further ado, Sayyid Ali Imam, I'd like to bring you in to discuss the historical status and the literary status of the two narrators.
Assalamu alaikum, dear brothers and sisters, and thank you for joining us once again. Now, as we've seen from our last two shows, we cannot simply close our eyes and just bury our heads in the sand and ignore these undeniable facts that have been documented, not just in Shia Hadith, but even in Sunni Hadith literature. We've covered in our previous episodes the methodology used by historians when it comes to the accounts documented in history. Likewise, the censorship involved within Sunni scholarship and the catch-22 situation when it comes to their approach in not only recording certain events of history, but also narrating the vices between the Sahaba. Now, in this show, we'll be focusing on 2 points, as you've mentioned, Sayyid Nazim Shah, which were raised by Farid, which were essentially on the same tradition, which was the confrontation that occurred outside the house of Sayeda Fatima Al Zahra. Farid has raised 2 main objections. One is a narrator is weak, which we'll come to inshallah ta'ala. Number 2, that this report is disconnected. As we know, there was a clear opposition from the Ahlul Bayt alayhi Islam and others who essentially gathered in the house of Sayeda Fatima Al Zahra due to the decision that was made in Saqifa Banu Saida, in which Abu Bakr had become the newly selected Khalifa. And now the state was essentially looking to secure that pledge of allegiance. Now the question is, to what extent did they go to? So now let's turn to Tarikh al-Tabari, volume 3, page number 202. As I've mentioned before, in terms of censorship and how the Sunnis approach the vices of the Sahaba, I think it's important to mention briefly what type of individual Tabari was. According to some books, it's been reported that he was the same individual person who actually believed that if one was to reject the caliphate of Abu Bakr and Umar, they should be killed. So straight away, this should give you an idea that when he actually reports this, what type of mentality he has about these individuals, and as to what extent he would actually document the totality of these events. Ibn Humayd narrated from Jarir, from Mughira, from Ziyad ibn Kulayb, said, Umar ibn Khattab came to the house of Ali, Talha and Zubair, and some of the immigrants were also in the house. Now, we've already established that in the previous show. Umar cried out, by God, either you come out to render the oath of allegiance, or I will set the house on fire. Zubair came out with his sword drawn. As he stumbled, the sword fell down from his hand. So they jumped over him and seized him. Now, this account is quite interesting because we will see how this particular event, how other historians have documented it. But you can see that even though Tabari has narrated this, recorded this, he's not actually being entirely truthful in what he's narrated. We'll come to that inshallah shortly. So that was from Al-Tabari. Next, we'll come to the status of the 2 individuals who Farid raised an objection about. The first person he deemed weak was Muhammad ibn Humayd al-Razi. Farid is not being honest here. He's only giving a one-sided story in terms of the credibility of this narrator. Let's have a look at what other scholars have said. So this is from Tarikh al-Baghdad, from Al-Khatib al-Baghdadi. And Abdullah ibn Ahmad, the son of Ahmad ibn Hanbal, says, my father, Ahmad ibn Hanbal, said, the knowledge would not perish in Ray as long as Muhammad ibn Humayd is alive there. The knowledge would not perish in Ray as long as Muhammad ibn Humayd is alive there. So this is Ahmad ibn Hanbal, and this has been narrated from his son, Ahmad ibn Hanbal, saying very clearly that had it not been for Muhammad ibn Humayd being present in Ray, the knowledge would have perished. And this is the same person who Farid is saying this person is a liar. Now, who should we trust? Should we trust Ahmad ibn Hanbal here? Or should we trust Farid? Should we trust one of the 4 Imams of Al-Sunnah wal Jama'ah regarding the status of this individual? Or should we trust Farid? Abu Abdullah Rahman Abdullah said, when Muhammad ibn Humayd al-Razi came to us, my father was in Al-Askar. When he went, my father came. So his companions started asking him about Ibn Humayd. So he said to me, why are they asking me about Muhammad ibn Humayd? I said, because he came here and narrated narrations that these people were not aware of. So he, Ahmad ibn Hanbal, said, did you write from him? I mean, did you record what he said? He said, yes, I wrote a volume from him. He, Ahmad ibn Hanbal, said, bring it to me. So I brought it to him. So he said, his narrations from Ibn Mubarak and Jarir are Sahih. And by the way, Jarir is the same person who is being narrated from in the previous report in Tarikh al-Tabari. Let me continue. By his narrations from the scholars of Ray, he knows better about it. And further, Muhammad ibn Juma al-Hafiz said, I asked Muhammad ibn Yahya al-Duhaili, what do you think about Muhammad ibn Humayd? He said, do you not see that I narrate from him? He then said, I was in the teaching class of Abu Bakr al-Sagani, Muhammad ibn Ishaq. He said, narrated to us Muhammad ibn Humayd. I asked, you narrate from Ibn Humayd? He said, why shouldn't I narrate from him? Even Ahmad ibn Hanbal and Yahya ibn Ma'in narrate from him. This individual, Muhammad ibn Humayd al-Razi, he's a trusted scholar. The Imams of Al-Sunnah wal Jama'ah have narrated from him. They have no problems with accepting his reports. Yes, there may have been some individuals who could have criticized him, and it's understandable. You know, when it comes to certain narrators, you can have this difference of opinion. But to outright deny the credibility of this individual is complete stupidity on Farid's side. Rather, it's deception, because he's not given a balanced opinion in terms of his credibility. So we've established the authenticity of the previous narrator. Let's come to Ziyad ibn Kulayb. And this is from the book, Tahrir Taqrib al-Tathhib, volume 1, page number 428, person 2096. And this book has been essentially tested by, or written by 2 scholars, Shoaib al-Arnout and Bashar Awad al-Maruf, and Ziyad ibn Kulayb. And it said about him, he is trustworthy from the 6th generation. He died in 1919 or 120 AH. He narrated in Muslim, Abu Dawud, Tirmidhi, and Nasai have narrated from him. So this individual, Ziyad ibn Kulayb, is somebody who's narrated in the 6 books. He's deemed extremely trustworthy. That is him in terms of his credibility as a narrator. So I know Farid raised an objection that this report is disconnected, but we will come to that inshallah. But just to show you an idea that this individual, Ziyad ibn Kulayb, is somebody who's trusted, and he's narrated in the 6 books of Hadith. So we've discussed a report in Tarikh al-Tabari. Let's come to a similar report recorded in Al-Sunnah by Abdullah ibn Ahmad ibn Hanbal. Now this is a completely different chain to the previous one, but this is just to show you how this event has reached us through multiple sources and multiple narrators. And inshallah, as I said before, we'll discuss the authenticity of the report. Okay, so this is in Kitab al-Sunnah, page number 225, hadith number 1220. Now, you notice this name, Musa bin Uqba, it's been highlighted in red. We'll come to that, inshallah ta'ala, who he is and his status. And this is from Shihab al-Zuhri, who said, the men of the Muhajireen were angered at the paying of allegiance to Abu Bakr. Among them were Ali ibn Abi Talib and Zubair ibn al-Awwam. So they entered the house of Fatima with weapons. Then Umar came with a gang of Muslims. Then one of them took the sword of Zubair and hit it on a stone until he broke it. Now, now this is quite interesting. You notice in the previous report in Tabari, he says that he left the house and he stumbled and the sword fell. But in this report, it's totally different. It's mentioned additional names of those who were present. It mentions the fact that there were people gathered in the house of Sayeda Fatima with weapons, and then there was a confrontation. There was a confrontation with those outside the house, with Umar and his party, and with those people who were present in the house. So this tradition is narrated from Zuhri, who is a very important figure. He's a Tabi'i. And this report is also similar, or if not identical, to the report mentioned in Muhibb al-Tabri's Riyad Al Nadira. The only difference is that the report found in Muhibb al-Tabri, he doesn't mention the chain, but this is the complete chain of that report. Let's have a look if this report is disconnected or not, because Farid could say, well, the Tabari report is disconnected, and so is this report disconnected. In fact, this report has also been directly narrated from a companion, and this is in the second chain of this report in Kitab al-Sunnah. And this is from Musa ibn Uqba. From Musa ibn Uqba said, Sa'd ibn Ibrahim said, I was told by Ibrahim ibn Abdul Rahman ibn Auf that Abdul Rahman was with Umar on that day, and that Muhammad ibn Muslima broke the sword of Zubair, and Allah knows best. So as you can see, the second report is completely connected. It's essentially from a grandfather to his son to his son. So this report, there's no doubt that this report has reached us through trusted narrators, and all these individuals are trusted. So the second chain which I presented from Kitab al-Sunnah has also been recorded by Ibn Kathir in his book Bidayah al-Nihaya, volume 8, page number 92, 93. So you can see the same transmitted report, and it says Muhammad ibn Muslima broke the sword of Zubair. Then it says Abu Bakr gave a sermon and addressed the people saying, I never wished to rule, nor did I ever ask it from anyone, whether in secret or in public. The Muhajirun accepted his words. Then Ali and Zubair said, we were angry only because we were left out of the consultation, which is a lie, because we know that Imam Ali Islam considered himself most worthy of leadership. Then it says, and we believe that Abu Bakr is more entitled than any other human being. And he was the companion of the cave, and we recognize his honor and his affairs. The Messenger of Allah had commanded him to lead the people in Salah, and that's about it. That's the narration. Now, I'm not going to discuss the last part of the narration, because that is a whole different subject matter. As Shias, we don't accept that, but even if we were to take the face value, come on, let's be realistic. People have come to your house with weapons, threatening to burn your house. There's been a confrontation outside your house, and all of a sudden now you are singing the praises of someone who's basically put you into that situation to begin with. So yeah, this report in itself, it's a very strange report, but as I said, in terms of the last part, we can discuss that at a later time. Now we come to Al-Hakim in his Al-Mustadrak, and this is Al-Dhahabi and Al-Hakim attesting this very narration from Musa ibn Uqba. I'm not going to read the whole chain. It's pretty much identical to the one mentioned by Ibn Kathir and the one mentioned in Kitab al-Sunnah. And this is in volume 3, page number 70, hadith number 20 and dash 4422. The viewers can go back and have a look at itself. So here's another authentication. So we've got Ibn Kathir, and we've got now Al-Hakim and Al-Dhahabi confirming that there was a confrontation outside the house of Sayeda Fatima Al Zahra. Zubair came out with a sword, and He didn't just merely stumble and drop the sword, as Tabari reported. There was an actual physical confrontation, and his sword was broken by alleged individual, Muhammad ibn Muslima. And we'll come to other reports where it mentions a different person breaking the sword. But with this type of censorship involved within Sunnism, you're never going to really know the totality of the events. After this particular incident, there was some sort of tension between Umar and Zubair. So this report is Qais ibn Abi Hazim, who said Zubair came to Umar ibn Khattab, asking him to permit him to participate in battles. Umar said, "Sit at your home. You have already participated in battles with the Messenger of Allah." He said, and Zubair repeated this request to him. So Umar said after the third or fourth time, "Sit at your home, for by Allah I fear that you and your companions gather around Medina and plan insurrection against the companions of the Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him." And this hadith is Sahih and is found in Al-Mustadrak of Al-Hakim, volume 3, page number 129, hadith number 210-4612. There was this hostility between Umar and Zubair, in which he's essentially accused him of being an instigator, someone who wants to raise rebellion against the state. And so this report actually supports the previous narration in terms of the confrontation. It shows that there was a history between these two people, and Umar was never at the front in terms of supporting him. If anything, he used to take extreme precaution around Zubair. And that's all, Sayyid Nazim Shah. I'd like to pass it back to you.
Thank you, Sayyid Imam. That's extremely revealing. If we were to rely on Farid Bahraini's information and his positioning of Ibn Humayd or Ziyad ibn Kulayb, we'd come to the conclusion that there was some sort of outcast. But you've also shown that this the report that he's objecting to is not the only report that's come to us. There are other parallel reports which authenticate the events, and these reports actually come back from companions or the first generation after the companions, and these have been verified. So, Sayyid Firdaus, the book, the Maghazi of Ibn Uqba has been mentioned. Can you try and help us and tell us a bit more about the status of this book and whether it's accepted?
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وصلى الله على محمد وعلى محمد وعجل فرجهم. And thank you very much, Syed. Yes, as Syed Ali also mentioned, these reports and authentications of their scholars for those reports, we saw that these reports, not the Tabari ones, but the other ones, they were narrated from a particular person who is Musa ibn Uqba. And Ibn Kathir, for example, also says that the narration comes from the Maghazi of Ibn Uqba. So this person is a very early scholar, historian, and he has a book of Maghazi, which is not available in our times. It's lost. But the narrations of this book are scattered in other books. We can find most of them in other books, as this example shown that multiple books have reported those narrations, for example, about this particular case. So as about his biography, we can go directly to Siyar A'lam al-Nubala by Al-Dhahabi, volume 6, page 114 to 117. He says that Musa ibn Uqba narrated from him with the letter Ain, which means Al-Jama'ah, which are the 6 major books of the Sunni Sahih Sitta, including the Bukhari and Muslim have narrated from him. So Musa ibn Uqba, and Al-Dhahabi says Al-Imam Al-Thiqa Al-Kabir. He says the Imam, the great Imam, the great trustworthy Imam. That's what Al-Dhahabi says about him. And he mentions his tribe and so on, and then says that وَكَانَ بَصِيرًا بِالْمَغَازِيَ النَّبَوِيَّةِ and أَلَّفَهَا فِي مُجَلَّدٍ. And he says that he was a very knowledgeable about Maghazi of the Prophet, the battles and so on at the time of the Prophet, and he has collected them into one volume book. And فَكَانَ أَوَّلَ مَنْ صَنَّفَ فِي ذَلِكَ, and he was the first person who has written a book about this subject. So the first person who collected a book about Maghazi is Musa ibn Uqba, and he's a trustworthy scholar according to them. And then he mentions that he was from the younger tabi'in, so he has narrated from some of the companions of the Prophet as well. And the status of his book is interesting because we see, for example, here in page 114, Dhahabi then quotes one of their scholars, and who says that Kana Malik is aqila lahu Maghazi man naktub, that whenever Malik ibn Anas, the Imam of the Maliki school, was asked about the Maghazi, if his students asked them, which Maghazi should we write down, which Maghazi should we accept, and so to speak, how to say, yeah, which Maghazi should we pay attention to or is authentic in his opinion. And Malik says, "Alaykum bimaghazi Musa ibn Uqba فإنه ثقة." He says you should refer to the Maghazi of Musa ibn Uqba because he is trustworthy. Also, the Ibn al-Munzir then narrates from three other people, from Mutarraf and Ma'an and Muhammad ibn Dhahak, who all of them said that whenever Malik was asked about Maghazi, he would say, you should refer to the Maghazi of the pious man, Musa ibn Uqba, فَإِنَّهَا أَصَحُّ الْمَغَاذِي. It is the most authentic Maghazi, book of Maghazi. And also mentions the same thing from another scholar from Malik, saying the same thing. And yeah, so we see that Malik ibn Anas, the Imam of Maliki school, he deems the Maghazi of Ibn Uqba of the most authentic book of Maghazi, and he he suggests this book as to his students to refer to this book. Al-Dhahabi then says in the next page that the Maghazi of Ibn Uqba is in one volume. It's not so big. He said we heard it, so he has Al-Dhahabi has heard it from his teachers, and he says وَغَالِبُهَا صَحِيح, and he says the most of its narrations are sahih. وَمُرْسَلٌ جَيِّد, and also some disconnected narrations which are good. He makes a distinction. It's also interesting for our discussion between just a weak mursal and a good mursal. So there are two kinds of mursal. One is which is jayyid, good. One is which is not acceptable. So it's not like this individual is saying that mursal, we should dismiss mursal narrations. There are scholars. Dhahabi is not just a layman. He's a giant scholar in their school. So he makes a distinction between these two types of disconnected narrations. So he said most of his narrations of Musa ibn Uqba in his book Maghazi are sahih. Some of them are disconnected, good disconnected narrations. And he says, but the Maghazi itself is not so big. It's short and needs some more details about events and so on. And mention some other scholars about opinions about his book and so on, and also even mentions that Malik used to say, whoever has been recorded to be from the companions of the Prophet who participated in Badr, if Musa ibn Uqba has written his name in his book and said this person participated in Badr, then it's true. Whoever is not there, then you shouldn't say that companion participated in Badr. So this is the weight that Malik put to this book. So it's interesting. And also he mentions at the next page another scholar, which is also a giant scholar, Yahya ibn Ma'in, and he is very famous, so he's known to everyone. And he says that Kitab Maghazi, Kitab Musa ibn Uqba and al-Zuhri min ashahi hazil kutub. So he says the book of Musa ibn Uqba from Zuhri, because most of his narrations apparently comes from Zuhri. He says is from among the most authentic of these books in this field, so in the field of Maghazi. So even the Mursal one, so that we discussed at the beginning from Zuhri, because there were two. One is connected from the children, from the son of Abdurrahman ibn Auf, and the other one was from Zuhri. So Yahya ibn Ma'in is saying that even the ones that comes from Zuhri are from from among the most authentic of these books that have been written in this field. So yeah. We have other scholars like here Suyuti, for example. It's also interesting because he quotes a Shafi'i, the Imam of the Shafi'i school. So these are not just simple layman scholars. They have their own schools. So Malik, Yahya ibn Ma'in, for example, you see a great scholar in their school, and a Shafi'i. Suyuti here narrates in his book Al-Bahr al-Zukhr fi Sharh Alfiya al-Athar and Alfiyat al-Asar, and he says in volume 2, page 482, 483, from Al-Khatib, from Yunus ibn Abdul A'la, who said, Shafi said to me, ليس في المغازي أصح من كتاب موسى بن عقبة مع صغره. He says, in the field of Maghazi, there is no book which is more authentic than the book of Musa ibn Uqba, despite its being short, despite its being not so big. But it's the most authentic book of Maghazi, according to Shafi'i as well. And he says he didn't make it as long as the other scholars like Ibn Ishaq and so on have done in this field. So we have at least 3 giant scholars who say that the book of Maghazi of Musa ibn Uqba is the most authentic, not one of the authentic, but the most authentic book of Maghazi. So the narrations that Said Ali mentioned at the beginning, they come from this book. So it's not something that you dismiss. This individual completely dismissed these guys and mentioned that it's Mursal from Az-Zuhri. So he knows, of course, if he's read these books, that there are connected chains, and the status of the book is also should be known to him. So we see that this dishonesty. So in any case, with all this, we also provided the connected chains also from that book. So it's not the Mursal ones. Even the Mursal ones, as we saw, Yahya ibn Ma'in said is from among the most authentic. But we provided a connecting chain, so there are difference. So in everybody's opinion, whichever method you choose, these reports are authentic. But if you want to go to go against these reports because you don't like it, because it makes problems for your beliefs, then you should consider maybe that there is something wrong with your beliefs and not use reports, especially when we have so many narrations, as we will see inshallah, about these incidents and the details of these incidents. If we put them together, there's no doubt, no sound mind would reject all these narrations and say these are all weak, all should be dismissed, and all, except if you go by your dogma, of course.
Thank you, Sayyid, for those. Again, we can see the deception and dishonesty that Farid Bahraini has been propagating in his video. Interesting to note, Sayyid, for those from your words, thank you, that there is in relation to the narration of from Zuhri, that one chain is disconnected and the other one is not. So we have a Mursal chain and one that is complete, yet Farid only wanted to focus on the Mursal chain, ignoring all the other evidence. It's not indicative of a sincere approach. But then we have the narration of Ibn Kulayb, which is Mursal. Here I have a question, and Sayyid Zaidi, maybe you can help me. Is a mursal narration rejected outright in all circumstances?
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله على أهله والصلاة والسلام على أهلها. Thank you so much, brother. Mursal, as far as mursal is concerned, firstly we need to define what mursal is, and as we know that mursal is any tradition or any report that a tabi'i has quoted, and it is a narration that he was not present at. That's how you loosely define mursal. There are some other conditions to that, but we don't have to go into that much detail. What are the stance of the scholars when it comes to mursal? Right, it is as if like if you hear from the people that are describing this mursal incident and that are outrightly rejecting the incident just because it has been quoted through some of the mursal traditions. But just one point that I want to make sure that this point gets across to the listeners before I proceed is that there is a muttasil, there is a connected chain, which is there in Al-Musannaf Ibn Abi Shaybah. So there is no point of saying that it is all mursal and they're all disconnected chains, and those disconnected chains cannot constitute as a proof. So this thing, we need to make a distinction that it is a connected chain and there is no problem in it, and it is something that we can go into more, and inshallah we're going to explain it more when we delve into the matter of Al-Musannaf. As far as mursal are concerned, generally, then we need to keep in mind that what principle Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani has said. Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, as we know, is called what? Hafidh al-Dunya, as if like he was the best of the scholar when it comes to the ilm of hadith, and he was the one that has written a lot on different topics of rijal, on different topics of ilm al-hadith. Just wanted to give you a little bit introduction of this personality. He is the one that has penned Tahdhib al-Tahdhib, that is oftenly being quoted by scholars when they want to quote some of the things that different scholars have said about a specific narrator. Likewise, he has written Taqrib al-Tahdhib, which is specifically what he has deducted or what he has gone through some of the biography of different narrators and what he has concluded out of it. Then he has a book which is on Du'afa, which is on the weak narrators, called Lisan al-Mizan. Likewise, he has written a lot on different topics. He has a book on Sahaba companions and al-Sahaba. So you can assume that he is a person that is really much into the Sunni scholarship. One of the monumental book that he has written, and it is a commentary on Sahih al-Bukhari, it's called Fath al-Bari. I mean, there is no single scholar on this earth who wants to research on Bukhari and he doesn't consult Fath al-Bari. It is the most important book that is ever written on the commentary of Bukhari. Even Sunni scholars, be it Salafis, be it Ash'aris, be it Maturudis, be it Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi'i, Hanbali, all of them, at the end of the day, they have to consult Fath al-Bari to get more and better understanding of the quotations of Bukhari. So what he has written, so this is Fath al-Bari fi Sharh al-Sahih al-Bukhari, and should I say Fath al-Bari bi Sharh Sahih al-Bukhari. And this is published by Darut Tayyiba, page number 104, it's volume number 9. In this, and page number 104 and 105, I'm so sorry, he says that what mursal is. So the way he defines is that the mursal of tabi'i is when a tabi'i mentions an occasion that he was not present at. This is called mursal, even though it is possible that he has heard it actually from a companion that has experienced the occasion. But the thing is that if he has been present, and listen to these words really closely. But the thing is that if he has been present in its time, it is considered as if he has actually heard it or was present in it, with the condition that he should be free of tadlis, and Allah knows best. So you see that Ziyad ibn Kulayb and other scholars, like even some of the people that Farid was criticizing, right? If they are free from tadlis, if they are not mudallisun, and let me be more clear on that. There are different, and I don't want to go more into this topic of mudallisun or tadlis, because there are different levels of tadlis. There's one level of tadlis that even Bukhari is mentioned in it, right? The first level of tadlis, right? And even Zahabi in his Siyar has mentioned that too. Then you have the second level of tadlis, And those people, even they are called mudallis, but generally their traditions, when they are quoting, in which they have not explicitly mentioned that they have heard it from other scholars, even then the scholars have accepted it, because there are a lot of those traditions that are present in Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, in their Sahihain. So Zuhri, even though he might be termed as quote unquote mudallis, but which level he is from? He's called from the second level of mudallisin. And scholars, like as Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani has mentioned, that scholars, they generally accept whatever they have quoted mu'an'an, like something that they might, that there is a possibility that they might have heard it, and there is a possibility they might not have. And then there are other levels of tadlis which are actually problematic, and we don't have to delve into it more. So even if it's mursal, it is not as if we would multiply it by 0 and it is something which is, grossly unaccepted. No, of course, there are some conditions. And if you go through the scholarly work, you would understand, even the scholars, look, here, there's a point. Even the scholars that don't consider mursal as a hujjah, right, as a proof, even they say that mursal can be a secondary proof to prove a point. Even Shafi'i was among the scholar who was the first, as per some of the Sunni scholars, who rejected mursal. He was also of the opinion that if a mursal tradition comes in with an authentic chain, and it is supported by a weak muttasil chain, then that weak muttasil chain or weak connected chain should be accepted. Even scholar like Shafi'i, who was the first to reject mursal, generally, if you see what Sunni scholarship has written. Now, the second quotation that I want to use is of, and this is another commentary which is written on a really famous book by Khatib Tabrizi, which is called Mishkat al-Masabih. So Mullah Ali Kari has penned this book called Mirqat, and in Mirqat al-Mafatih, volume number 9, page number 434, and this book is published by Darul Kutub al-Ilmiya, Beirut. He says, Qultu, I say, Mullah Ali Kari says, Mursal al-Tabi'i حجة عند الجمهور فكيف مرسل من اختلف في صحة صحبته. This is a really important quote. What does Mullah Ali Kari say? Mullah Ali Kari says that mursal is accepted by majority of the scholars. They're not minority. They're not like 1 or 2 people that would accept mursal. If you go through the books of Ilm al-Hadith, you would see Ahnaf, Malikis, Abu Hanifa in their school, Malik ibn Anas in their school, and one of the reports is Ahmad bin Hanbal in their school too. Ahmad bin Hanbal, they would accept mursal. Only Shafi'i was the person that rejected it among the 4 top Sunni scholars. And that too, I already explained what he meant by it. So now we have another quotation, and this is for the viewers that are generally from Indo-Pak. But this scholar is really well respected, and he has written a lot, and he's generally accepted within the Salafi school. His name is Ra'is Al Nadawi. Al Nadawi, Dar al Nadawa, it is present in Lucknow, India, and some of the prolific scholars that came in were from that school. So he's also Nadawi, and he is in charge of Jami' al-Salafiyya in India and Banaras. So in one of his book, which is on the topic of funeral prayers, right? He has written a book called Namaz Janaza aur Uske Masail, which translate as funeral prayers and problems related to it. In page number 46, he says, let me quote in Urdu and inshallah then I'll translate. ये मालूम है कि मुरसल हदीस अहनाफ व मालिकिया के नज़दीक मुतलकन हुज्जत है और दूसरे अहले इल्म के नज़दीक बाज़ शराइत के साथ हुज्जत है, बाज़ शराइत के साथ हुज्जत है, जिनमें से एक ये है कि वो दूसरी मुत्तसिल सनद से ख्वाह ज़ईफ हो मरवी हो. What does it say? Let me translate it to you. That it is to be known that the mursal report is accepted without any condition, without any stipulation by Ahnaf and Malikiyites. The majority of the people within the Sunni school of thought are Ahnaf. In Turkey, in India, in Pakistan, in Bangladesh, majority of them, even in Iraq, a lot of them are Ahnaf. And then you have Malikiyites. You go to North Africa, Morocco, Algeria, and different other countries, a lot of them are Malikiyites. they accept mursal without any condition, and other people of knowledge accept it with few conditions, and one of it is that the mursal report is also quoted by a connected chain, even though connected one is weak. So you see, like, it is not like a mursal tradition comes in and then you have a muttasil one. Okay, there is some problem with the muttasil one, but if the mursal one is authentic, that even then the muttasil one, if it's a weak one, it has to be accepted. Even the scholars that are really strict when it comes to the mursal tradition. So you can see how the scholars say one thing and how someone in social media, he reacts to the other thing, right? Now we have Qadi Shawkani. Qadi Shawkani needs no introduction, right? He has a prolific book called Nailul Awtar, right? And when volume 7, page number 92, Dar ibn Jawzi, he says that although the hadith, so he is discussing a masala, he's discussing an issue, and then he quotes a mursal tradition, right? But he says that although the hadith is mursal, disconnected, but it gets strengthened by a connected report before. So even though that, scholars, it's not multiply by zero rule that Farid al-Bahraini, or Farid al-Bahraini, should I say, wants to imply. It is something that you need to go and see in the context and see if there's any disconnected chains. No problem. Are they authentic? Yeah, they are authentic. Is there any muttasil chain? Yeah, there is. Is there any problem in it? Perhaps yes. I'm saying perhaps for the sake of argument, right? Even then, it is to be accepted. So these are some of the codes that we need to keep in our mind, and we should not be naive enough to get into this propaganda of saying this is mursal, and this is mursal. And one thing that I think Brother Firdaus or someone might have mentioned this, and I think this is the point that I got from Brother Firdaus, was that even though the mursal traditions that are to be said, quote unquote, mursal, the shuyukh of those scholars, when you go, like Ziyad ibn Kulayb, they are almost thiqat. There is no one du'afa within them. Even we accept it is mursal, but even then, all of his shuyukh, all of his teachers are accepted. That's why they accept the mursal of Sa'id ibn Musayyab. Why do they accept the mursal of Sa'id ibn Musayyab? Why do they accept the mursal of Hasan al-Basri sometimes? Why do they accept the mursal of Ibrahim al-Nakhri? Why? Because they say, oh, the teachers of these scholars were generally thiqah, so we don't have to go and delve into it and we don't have to investigate more. They are generally thiqah, so there shouldn't be a problem. These people that are kind of getting really emotional when we are quoting mursal, these are the same people that have accepted it. Wallahi Nadim, I'm not saying. Shafi'i has said, even Shafi'i, the reason I'm taking Shafi'i as a case point or a case study is that he's the person that is to be said, the first person to say mursal is not accepted. Fine. Shafi'i is the one that said Al-Mu'atta of Malik is the Sahih book, it's the most Sahih book that is present on the earth. Okay, you go through the Mu'atta properly, Al-Mu'atta of Malik, you'll see bunch of traditions in which Malik is not even quoting any chain in it, right? And likewise, these people, these social media warriors that are always instigating wars against Tashayyu, against Shia Muslims, right? Aren't these same people, when they go and write the articles, they accept mursal? Oh, it is a mursal, but a scholar Allan, a scholar Fulan, a scholar etc. This scholar, that scholar accepted it. Right? Just go through the books of Silsilat al-Hadith of Sahih of Albani. How many times he has said, oh, this gets strengthened because of a weak change. This gets strengthened because of weak chain, etc., etc. This will be my last point. If you go through the earliest work, see, Al-Muwatta, as I mentioned, is a 2nd century work. Likewise, Ibn Abi Shayba, Al-Musannaf Ibn Abi Shayba, the largest collection of Athar. If you go through it, it's, there are so many volumes to it. He has quoted so many mursal. Like if you go and if you see An Ibrahim al-Nakh'i, An Ibn Mas'ud, right? Ibrahim al-Nakh'i and Ibn Mas'ud. There's a long gap between them, right? But they will accept it, right? An Ali ibn Abi Talha, An Ibn Abbas, right? Okay, Ali ibn Abi Talha has never heard from Ibn Abbas. Shunu hada? Like what is this? Disconnected. But yeah, it is accepted because there is thicker between it. And Sa'id ibn Musayyab, قال أبو بكر أو قال عمر. right? عن الشعبي عن علي, right? Again, disconnected, but it is completely acceptable when it comes to them. Likewise, another example is Al-Musannaf of Abdul Razak ibn Hammam al-Yamani. He is one of the scholars that is the teacher of Ahmad bin Hanbal, another great Sunni scholars, right? He has a book Al-Musannaf, and he has quoted so many Mursal traditions, so many of them. Ana Abdul Razak and Ma'mar and Fulan قال رسول الله هذا أو قال عمر هذا قال أبو بكر كذا وكذا قال علي كذا وكذا, like these kind of things, right? So just to wrap it up, we need to go historically and see what Sunni scholars were and how did they become worshippers of Isnad, right? Or Badul Isnad, and then what happened. And even then, they were not that strict as Farid al-Bahraini is, right? I mean, like, he loves to, the scholar was said weak by this and this and that. If you go through this, trust me, I'm just giving you a challenge. Give me one single chain in which all the narrators are said thiqa by everyone. This is a challenge to everyone. Even Malik ibn Anas, he has been criticized. Even Shafi'i, he has been criticized. Abu Hanifa, being criticized. Ahmad bin Hanbal, criticized. Bukhari, being criticized by Abu Zur'a Abu Hatim al-Razi. Give me one example in which you have one single narrator who hasn't been criticized. Don't give me random quotes. Oh, he criticized this, he criticized that. Go through the rules that your scholars have made for yourself. And over to you, brother.
Thank you, Sayyid Zadi. That is extremely helpful, especially defining what is meant by mursal, and to show that Sunni literature is full of mursal narrations, and Sunni scholars, classical scholars who are revered in the Sunni school of thought, have said that the mursal of Tabiz is accepted, and it's accepted in 3 of the 4 Sunni schools, and even the 4th one accepts it. That puts to bed the issue of whether a mursal narration can be accepted or not. But just to for the sake of further clarity, Said, for those, are there any other narrations in other books which mention this event?
Yes, thank you, Sayyid Nazim Shah. So I think we in the last episode we talked about some of those reports, historic with historic values, and also we have seen from Tabari, from other books, from the oldest Maghazi books, that there was a confrontation, but the specific confrontation which includes a Zubair, and that his sword was broken, it has been narrated through numerous books. So in our books, in Shia books, it's we have plenty of narrations, and authentic ones, and from the earliest time, from the companions of the imams, and also in the non-Shi'i books, we find these reports in many books through many chains. Numerous chains exist for these, being it through historians without chains mentioning in their books of history, like we mentioned last time, or being it through connected chains through Tabi'in or to companions of the Prophet. I think I can give you a few examples that have that we haven't used maybe so often. But there are, of course, in the next episode, which we will discuss the incidents of the burning or threat of burning. We will come back to these narrations about the Zubair as well. So these are Zubair as mentioned in those reports as well. But this would be in the next episodes. But I want to mention also maybe a few other witnesses or sides to this story of what happened to Zubair and his sword. So we have here Ansab al-Ashraf, written by al-Baladhuri, who passed away 279, a historian, very famous historian actually. Interestingly, this individual also made an objection about this author. Anyways, we will talk about his personality in next episodes, inshallah. But I just wanted to mention what he says about this through one of the such reports or his account. This book is actually a book about genealogy of the Arab tribes in Arabia, and he basically mentions the tribes of Quraysh and which person was whose son as whose son as who, and whose mother was who is whose mother, and so on. So, and their tribes and differences and so on. And in between, he mentions also some reports of history and things that happened and so on. He mentioned in the biography of one of the persons called Abdullah ibn Abi Rabi'a with a title Bujair, who was from Bani Makhzum. He says his father was Amr ibn al-Mughira, and he says that this person Bujair, he says that when Abu Bakr became Khalifa, وَاعْتَزَلَ الزُّبَيْرُ means and Zubair isolated himself from paying allegiance, pledging allegiance to Abu Bakr, or refused to do so. Then وجهه أبو بكر مع محمد بن مسلمة الأنصاري إليه. So he says that Abu Bakr sent this person Bujair together with Muhammad ibn Maslam al-Ansari, which Brother Sayyid Ali mentioned through authentic reports, this name, that Muhammad ibn Maslama was the person who broke the sword. So here Baladhari mentions through other reports that he had. He doesn't mention a chain, but because he is just mentioning this story in the biography of this person, he says that Abu Bakr sent him together with Muhammad ibn Maslam al-Ansari to a Zubair, and فَعَقَلَهُ بُجَيْرٌ وَسَرَعَهُ. So this person Bujair, he tied a Zubair with a rope, something that he Iqal means something that a rope that you tie the leg of a camel to so that it cannot move. This is something like this. So he held Zubair like this and knocked him down, and then they broke the head of his sword. So he is with Muhammad ibn Maslama, and they knock down Zubair and then take his sword away and break it. And then Zubair then says to him, "Ama wallah لئن كسرته اليوم لرب كربة فرجتها عن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله." He says, "You've now broken my sword, this sword of mine today, but I might have, at the time of the Prophet, I was removing some griefs from the face of the Prophet with this sword. So I was helping him with this sword, and now you broke it." So he is kind of mentioning this to the person who broke his sword. This is something that has not been mentioned in other reports. It's also mentioned that this individual person, Bujair, was also involved in arresting Zubair. We have, interestingly, we will see who else was involved in this incident. That there was a clash, a confrontation, swords were involved. It was not so peaceful or friendly that they wanted to push to the mainstream, actually. So we have here, for example, Abu Bakr al-Jawhari. This scholar is a bit unknown, is not a mainstream scholar because of the content of this book. This book called As-Saqifa wa Fadak, he mentions the narrations about Saqifa and also the narrations regarding Fadak. But of course, because of the content is controversial and they do not like this kind of content, the book has been pushed a bit away and is not got the attention that usually the other books they get in their circles. But the content is very interesting because we see sometimes we see some more details about some events. In any case, we will also, this person this individual also raised an objection about the author of this book, but we will also, like Al-Baladhari, we will mention this person's biography and who he was in next episode, inshallah. However, in this here, I just wanted to mention some of the reports that he has put about this incident, which includes Zubair and his sword and so on, and how the allegiance was done. So at page 46, 47, he says, he narrates from Abu Zayd Umar ibn Shabbah. Umar ibn Shabbah, as we know, this is the famous scholar who is the author of the book Tarikh al-Madinah al-Munawwara, a very famous book of Tarikh. And Umar ibn Shabbah, he is actually a trustworthy person. And if we look into this book, 95% of all these narrations come from this person. So Abu Bakr al-Jawhari, 95 or 90% of his narrations come from this individual, this scholar, Umar ibn Shabbah. And interestingly, the book that we have today from Umar ibn Shabbah, it does not include anything about the era of Abu Bakr. It includes only the time of the Prophet, the battles and so on. It includes the time of Umar. It includes the time of Uthman, but nothing about the time of Umar and Saqifa, and so the time of Abu Bakr and Saqifa and what happened. So this entire Saqifa part is completely missing from this book, and this book is a very important book because the author is famous and is authentic according to their scholars. But this part of history in this book is completely missing. We just see some traces of it in other books, like this one, who is direct student of Umar ibn Shabbah, who has recorded all his narrations or most of his narrations into his book. But the book itself, as I said, is completely blank about Saqifa and Abu Bakr. One would question why. Why is this? Why is this missing? Did someone remove the entire thing because of the content that I want to show? And also in next episode we will see some other reports. Why? This is a question mark. Interestingly, the same if you remember. If you have Tabari, for example, Sayyid Ali also mentioned that in Tabari he does not record the entire thing. He also partially narrates some stuff, not everything. And Tabari, for example, he used to narrate a lot from Abi Mikhnaf. And Abi Mikhnaf, in his biography, if you read, Abi Mikhnaf had an entire book about Saqifa, an entire book about Saqifa, what happened, and how the allegiance was pledged to Abu Bakr. And he doesn't mention anything from him in this case about this particular thing, about this particular part of history. Likewise, as we said, Umar ibn Shabbah part about Saqifa is completely gone. Al-Waqidi, who is another scholar of Maghazi, even though they have weakened him, but they consider him an imam in this field, imam in Maghazi. Al-Waqidi had also a book of Saqifa. His Saqifa book is also gone. It's missing. It's nowhere to be seen. We just see traces of it in some books. Some other scholars have narrated from him. Even Shia narrators sometimes refer to the books that now are missing, but from their scholars, and mention the reports that they had. And we know that they had books, but the content, the books are gone. The books are buried. This goes also to the censorship part that we discussed in the previous episodes, that there is a massive kind of thing going on with the censorship thing. Even the entire books are missing, entire volumes of books are missing, which have problematic reports about problematic parts of or controversial parts of history. In any case, let's cut it short and go to the narrations that this scholar mentions. Abu Bakr al-Jawhari narrates from Umar ibn Shabbah through his chain of narrators from Abil Aswad. And he says, غَزَبَ الرِّجَالُ مِنَ الْمُهَاجِرِينَ فِي بَيْعَةِ أَبِي بَكْرٍ بِغَيْرِ مَشْوَرَةٍ. He says the same thing that Sayyid Ali mentioned from Maghazi of Ibn Uqba, that a group of Muhajirin were upset about the pledging of allegiance to Abu Bakr. because they were not consulted. Among them, Ali alayhi salam and Zubair, they entered the house of Fatima. Ma'ahuma as-silah. They were armed. They had their weapons with them. So this was not something peaceful or anything. They were ready for a battle. So فجاء عمر في إصابة منهم أسيد بن خزير وسلامة بن سلامة بن بقش. And with him, Umar came with a group of men. Among them, Usayd ibn Khuzair and Salamat ibn Salama. We saw some of these names previously in the previous reports. This is a completely chain, as I mentioned, completely different chain. And then he says, فَصَحَتْ فَاطِمَةً وَنَاشَدَتْهُمُ اللَّهِ. And then Fatima salamullah alayha shouted and invoked them by Allah. What happened? Why she did this? There is nothing about it here in this report. So these are also parts that are missing from this narration. That's why suddenly Omar came with a group of men, and then Fatima salamullah alayha shouts and invokes Allah with them and swears them by Allah to not do what they want to do. So there is something that's happened there that this narration tries to dismiss or just censor. And they then says that فَأَخَذُوا سَيْفَيْ عَلِي وَالزُّبَيْرِ. They took the swords of Ali and Zubair. Here it mentions two swords. They took away the sword of Imam Ali alayhi salam and also the sword of Zubair. So there were two swords that were involved. فَضَرَبُوا بِهِمَا الْجِدَارِ حَتَّى كَسَرُوهُمَا. They hit it to the wall until they broke both of the swords. ثم أخرجهما عمر فيسوقهما أتبايعا. So then Umar took them out of the house and dragged them to Abu Bakr to pledge allegiance. And then Abu Bakr was on the pulpit and he apologized to them. The things that Sayyid Ali mentioned in the narration of Ibn Uqba, the same things have been mentioned here. That Abu Bakr said, I didn't want to take this position. It was just given to me and stuff like that. And they at the end said, we are okay with that you have been elected as the leader, no problem. And the same content that Sayyid Ali also mentioned. So we have a complete clash between the first part of the narration and the last part, which seems to be some kind of pushing some kind of narrative to the facts that were on side. And then the scholar says also that another person, Thabit ibn Qais ibn Shammas, was also among the people who went with Umar. So we have here another name. We have Usayd ibn Uzair, Salamat ibn Salama. We had in previous ones Bujair. We had Muhammad ibn Maslama. So we see how many people were involved at the end. And then he says that Abu Bakr Jawahri also in the next page says that, mentions also Muhammad ibn Salama. He says Salama, I think this is Tashif. Might be a copy mistake. Muhammad ibn Maslama was also with them, and he says that some reports say that actually Muhammad was the person who broke the sword of Zubair. In another report, also through Umar ibn Shabba, as I mentioned, the famous historian, this time the chain of narration goes to a Sha'bi. A Sha'bi, this was also a Tabi'i, and it's interesting, the context of this narration is also interesting. He says that Abu Bakr asked, where is Zubair? So after Abu Bakr was elected, he asked for Zubair, where is he? I don't see him. فقيل عند علي وتقلد سيفه وقد تقلد سيفه. They said to him that he is with Ali and he has his sword with him. So they mentioned to him that something is going on there. So Abu Bakr said, قم يا عمر قم يا Khalid ibn al-Walid. So Abu Bakr said to Umar and Khalid ibn Walid to get up. and go to Ali and Zubair and bring them to me. فدخل عمر وقام خالد على باب البيت من خارج. Umar entered the house, but Khalid stayed at the door outside, did not enter the house, but Umar entered. And Umar said to Zubair, ما هذا السيف? What is this sword that you have with yourself? Zubair says, نبايع عليا. We want to pledge allegiance to Ali. Umar then فاخترته Umar فضرب به حجرا فكسره. Then Umar snatched away the sword from Zubair and hit it to a rock and broke it. ثم أخذ بيد الزبير فأقامه ثم دفعه. Then he held the hand of Zubair and made him stand up and then pushed him and said, "Ya Khalid, dunakahu famsikhu." Pushed him and then said to Khalid ibn al-Walid, to hold the Zubair tight and do not let him go. And then Omar said to Ali alayhi salam, "Qum fabaya li Abi Bakr." Get up and pledge allegiance to Abu Bakr. فَتَلَكَّ وَاحْتَبَسَ فَأَخَذَ بِيَدِهِ. Then Amir al-Mu'minin salam reserved himself, refused to do so, to get up. And Umar held with his hand and said, "Qum fa'aba an yaqum." And Umar then held his hand and said, "Stand up." But Amir al-Mu'minin salam refused to stand up. فَحَمَلَهُ وَدَفَعَهُ كَمَا دَفَعَ الزُّبَيرُ. Then Umar dragged him. This is a Sunni report. This has nothing to do with us. So this is how they want to portray. So the humiliation, whatever, you can judge. Dragged them and pushed him like he pushed Zubair, فأخرجه, and then took him out of the house. وراءت فاطمة ما صنع بهما. Then Fatima salamun alayha, when she saw that what they did to them, to الزبير and Ali alayhi salam, فقامت على باب الحجرة وقالت يا أبا بكر ما أسرع ما أغرتم على أهل بيت رسول الله. And then Fatima salamun alayha stood at the door of the house and then said, "Oh Abu Bakr, how quick you stormed upon the house of the family of the Prophet. How quick you did this. You attacked our house. Wallah la ukallimu Umar hatta alqa Allah." And then Fatima Al Zahra salamullah alayha said, "By Allah, I will not talk to Umar until I meet Allah Azza wa Jal." And then Qala, which refers to a Sha'bi then tries to push another what is called another thing that he wants to push to the audience. He says, فَمَشَى إِلَيْهَا أَبُو بَكْرَ بَعْدَ ذَلِكَ وَشَفَعَ لِعُمَرَ وَطَلَبَ إِلَيْهَا فَرَضِيَتْ عَنْهُ. Then Sha'bi says, later, after this incident, after the pledge of allegiance was finished and so on, after that, Abu Bakr came to Fatima salamun alayha and interceded for Umar to forgive Umar. And after that, she was satisfied with it and was okay. So this last part, interestingly, has been narrated in other books of Sunnis, like by Al-Bayhaqi, which has been pushed to the mainstream books all over the place. Without the first part of the narration, the clash, the Khalid ibn al-Walid, and how the pledge of allegiance, the sword and stuff like that is completely gone. Just the last part, that Abu Bakr came to Fatima salamun alayha and apologized, and she was okay and she was satisfied. That's it. This part is only available in the books of Sunnis through a Sha'bi. The rest of the narration is not. Here we have at least some previous history of what happened, what was going on. So you see the dishonesty, you see that the censorship that is going on. for example, also this is interesting because it also has to do with the mursal narrations. Sha'bi, as I said, is a tabi'i. So in this case, because they just wanted to mention this last part that Fatima salam alayha was okay, was satisfied at the end, they even push this mursal narration and say, for example, Ibn Kathir says, a Salafi scholar says, "Haza qawiyyun jayyid." It's a good, strong chain. And he says, obviously, Sha'bi has narrated it maybe from Ali alayhi salam, so a conjecture without any proof. And there a scholar says that Sha'bi has never heard from Ali alayhi salam, actually. And then he says, or أو ممن سمع من Ali, or they say he has heard them maybe from someone who has heard it from Ali alayhi salam. Who that was, who that could be, all conjecture, no proofs. So we see that whenever they like, they push a mursal narration, disconnected narration to the mainstream to say this is a reliable thing. This is the thing that you should trust. And whenever they don't like it, even if you provide connected chains, they just dismiss it. They try to weaken it. They try to attack it. So you see the dishonesty. It's all over the place. In every layer of these history parts of history, you see these dishonesty, censorship, changing of the content, and also distorting the things, hiding stuff, removing stuff, entire books gone. So you see the same patterns again and again. Again, from Abu Bakr al-Jawhari, he narrates. Again from Umar ibn Shabbah, as we mentioned, but without mentioning the entire chain, he says that through the chains of narrators of Umar ibn Shabbah, whoever they were, that Umar came to the house of Fatima with a group of Ansar and a few people from among the Muhajirin, and then the same content like we have in Tabari and also in Musannaf ibn Abi Shaybah, for example, and also the thing that we mentioned from books of Ibn Abdul Rabbih, that you either come out of the house to pledge allegiance, or I will burn down the house upon you. فخرج الزبير مسلطا بالسيف, exactly like we have in that Tabari's book. Then the Zubair came out of the house taking out his sword to attack. فَأَتَنَقَهُ زِيَادُ بْنُ لُبَيْدَ الْأَنصَارِي. Here we have another person involved in the thing. So these are not contradictions. These are all witnesses just seeing a different person, because there were so many people attacking Zubair and taking away his sword. How many names we had till now? I think 5 or 6 or 7, and this is another one. And how he was involved, he says فَأَتَنَقَهُ. Ziyad ibn Lubayd, he choked, he pressed the neck of Zubair. وَرَجُلٌ آخر, and another one, we don't know who, maybe one of the previous ones that we already mentioned, Bujair, Muhammad ibn Maslama, Salamat ibn Salama, whatever. So two people who were just involved in the neck of Zubair. And then the sword dropped from his hand, and then Umar took the sword and broke it. ثم أخرجهم بتلابيبهم يساقون سوقا عنيفا حتى بايعوا أبا بكر. Then all the groups of men, they took Amir al-Mu'minin and Zubair with their clothes, held them with their clothes, and dragged them intensely towards the mosque where Abu Bakr was to pledge allegiance. Also, Abu Bakr al-Jawhari mentions, again says that Abu Zayd, who is Umar ibn Shabbah, has also narrated through Al-Nadhr ibn Shamil, and who is another famous scholars of theirs, passed away 209, as we see in the footnotes. Through his chains, he has a longer narrations through his chain from someone that we will discuss, inshallah, the longer versions from a few books, which has more details about burning, about the Zubair and so on. But here we have the short version of this. He says that to his narration, as Ibn Shamil, he says that the sword of Zubair was carried towards Abu Bakr. So after they broke it, or in this case, this report says that it was not broken. They took it to Abu Bakr while Abu Bakr was on the pulpit preaching. And then Abu Bakr said, Azribu bihi al-hajar. They said, Abu Bakr said that hit it to the rock to break it. And then one of the narrators he said that Abu Amr ibn Hammas, some person with this name, Abu Amr ibn Hammas, he said that, and I indeed saw that rock, and I saw that thrust that they hit the sword with to that rock. I saw the trace of it. And this person says, وَالنَّاسُ يَقُولُونَ, and the people in Medina, they used to say, هَذَا أَثَرُ زَرْبَةِ سَيْفِ الزُّبَيْرِ. This is the trace of the of where the sword of Zubair was broken. This is the trace of it when they hit it to this rock. So we see maybe centuries, or at least 100 or 150 years later, or more or less, people used to see the same rock and the place where the sword was broken. Interesting details. I think we will see some more about this incident, which involves Zubair and his sword, in next episodes, inshallah, as well, through other chains. We have mentioned multiple chains here from these scholars. We see that, yeah, you don't get the entire history if you look through one book. You need to look at all evidences and put them together to make up your mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Said, for those. An absolute eye-opener. So what I've taken from today's episode is that despite all the self-censorship that the Sunni scholarship has exercised over its own literature, and despite their best attempts to minimize or hide or to explain away the events that happened, we have undeniably we have authentic sources according to the Sunni school of thought, not single but multiple sources, which are either connected hadith or mursal hadith, which are also accepted by them in their school of thought, and their books are full of such narrations, to the extent that people like Farid Bahraini will have to tell lies and to hide or to misquote or to give biased opinions to try and prove that this isn't available in their own literature. Farid Bahraini, I'm speaking directly to you, simply because these 3 episodes should be an eye-opener for you. And if you have any sincerity towards Islam and towards history and towards the conflicts that have taken place and the differences, and if you have any sincerity towards searching the truth, searching for the truth, respond to us. This is the 3rd video that's been put out, and you haven't yet responded to any of these videos, even if it's so much as to say, I haven't got time for this, I'm no longer interested, or I will respond in due course, this needs much more research, which would be a much more sincere response. But I don't understand why you've gone into hiding over this. You put the challenge out, we've responded, and now you're hiding. It doesn't show sincerity on your part. And for the viewers out there, I would urge you to look at all the evidence that is being presented. Inshallah, we will be back with another show. We will be providing further evidence. But this does show that there was a conflict that took place outside the house of the daughter of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon her, between Sahaba, and there was a dispute, there was an altercation, swords were drawn and broken, and according to the Sunnis' own Hadith literature, there are multiple reports of this going all the way back to the Sahaba. So, inshallah, I think we shall leave it at this point here, and we shall hopefully see you in our next show, where we carry on with this work and provide you with the evidence for you to make an informed opinion. Goodbye from us. Allah Hafiz, and inshallah, see you next time.